Welcome to the most terrifying channel. Today, we're venturing into Mexico's darkest legends, places where dolls whisper, hotels breathe, and the dead refuse to stay buried. What if these horrors aren't just stories, but warnings? Stay with us, because the truth behind these cursed locations will haunt you long after the video ends. Number 1. La Isla de las Muñecas, Island of the Dolls, Xochimilco, Mexico City. Hidden deep within the canals of Xochimilco, just south of Mexico City, lies a place that feels like it was torn straight from a nightmare. La Isla de las Muñecas, the Island of the Dolls, is shrouded in mist and legend, its trees dripping with decaying, eyeless dolls, some missing limbs, others grinning with cracked faces. Their presence is not decorative. They are warnings. Remnants of a man's lifelong descent into madness, or a desperate attempt to keep something at bay. The story begins in the 1950s, when Don Julian Santana Barrera retreated to this isolated island. According to legend, he discovered the body of a young girl who had drowned under mysterious circumstances in the canal. No one came for her. No one claimed her. But Don Julian believed her spirit lingered. Soon after, he found a doll floating in the water. He assumed it had belonged to her, and he hung it on a tree as an offering, a gesture of respect or perhaps guilt. But the silence on the island never lasted. Don Julian said he heard whispers at night. Small footsteps in the soil when no one was near. A child's laugh carried on the wind. The doll's presence didn't calm the spirit. It only stirred something deeper. He began collecting more dolls, broken, discarded ones he found in the canal, or traded for produce from visitors. Some had eyes that never closed. Others arrived headless. One even came with its own noose, already tied. Years passed, and the trees filled with their watchful faces. Locals whispered that the dolls moved. Their plastic limbs twitched. Their mouths whispered prayers, or threats. Visitors returned with stories of dolls blinking at them, turning their heads ever so slightly when backs were turned. Some claimed to hear a girl's voice begging for help. Others said they saw the dolls cry. In 2001, Don Julian was found drowned in the same spot where he said the girl had died. Locals say it was the spirit reclaiming what was hers. Or perhaps the dolls had grown hungry. Today, the island stands untouched, except by those brave or foolish enough to visit. The air is heavy, thick with rot and silence. Boats slow as they pass. The trees creak with weight. Visitors often leave in a hurry, claiming they feel watched, followed even after returning to shore. And still, the dolls remain. Watching. Waiting. Decaying but never gone. Each one tells a story. Each one bears witness. To what, no one dares say aloud. Number 2. La Posada del Sol, Mexico City. In the heart of Mexico City, hidden behind rusted gates and overgrown walls, stands a decaying monument to ambition, failure, and madness. La Posada del Sol was once the dream of architect Fernando Saldana Galvan, a sprawling hotel meant to rival the grandest resorts of Europe. Lavish gardens, a library, even an art gallery were planned. But the dream never came true. The hotel never opened. And what remains now is a hollow, crumbling husk, a labyrinth of dark corridors, rotting stairwells, and a presence that refuses to leave. No one knows exactly what happened to Saldana. Some say he was crushed under the weight of debt and spiraling costs. Others whisper that the construction site became cursed when workers began dying. One allegedly fell from a scaffold and was buried hastily under concrete. But the most enduring legend claims Saldana went mad, locked himself in his office, and hanged himself from the rafters, surrounded by unfinished blueprints and whispers that wouldn't stop. Since then, the building has remained sealed, officially. But that hasn't stopped the curious. Urban explorers sneak in, lured by rumors of hidden catacombs and strange symbols scrawled on the walls. What they find is worse. Shadows that dart across hallways with no source. Cold spots that follow you from room to room. A presence behind you that you can feel, but never see. Some speak of hearing cries in the silence. Others say they hear someone laughing. but it's the girl that keeps most from returning. In the courtyard, there's a small makeshift shrine, candles, dolls, and a single, faded photograph of a young girl. No one knows who she was or how she died, but many believe her spirit is trapped inside. Visitors report hearing her voice calling out, sweet and soft, asking for help. Others have seen her, standing barefoot in the shadows, her dress soaked as though she drowned. She never moves, never speaks, until you blink. Then she's gone. Some who've explored the basement say the girl leads them down narrow halls, always just ahead, never quite visible, until they find themselves lost, in rooms that weren't there before, the exits gone. One man said he followed her laugh through 3 floors of darkness before realizing it was echoing inside his own head. Locals avoid the building. Children are told not to look at it as they pass. Some say the curse of the hotel was never about the building itself, but what Saldana invited in when he tried to build paradise on haunted ground. Whatever it is, it's still there. Waiting. Watching. And when night falls over La Posada del Sol, the hotel breathes again. Number 3. San Juan de Dios Hospital, Guadalajara. Tucked away in the older quarters of Guadalajara stands San Juan de Dios Hospital, a crumbling relic of the past where the smell of disinfectant has long since faded, replaced by mildew, dust, and something less definable. The hospital, once a center of healing, now holds a different energy, stagnant, oppressive, and watching. Though parts of it remain in use, entire wings have been sealed off for decades. But those abandoned corridors never stay silent. It's one of the oldest hospitals in Mexico, and its walls have absorbed centuries of pain. During epidemics, it overflowed with the dying. During times of conflict, it became a holding ground for wounded soldiers who cried out in agony until their last breath. But it's what happens now, in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn, that draws whispers. Security guards rotate often, and few stay long. Most won't speak on record, but those who have dared to talk tell of things that simply shouldn't happen. Wheelchairs left in storage areas found positioned in the center of darkened hallways. The sound of them rolling, squeaking slowly, heard echoing down the corridors when no one else is there. Light switches that flicker violently. A room in the old psychiatric wing that always smells faintly of blood, no matter how many times it's scrubbed. Then there are the voices. They drift from behind sealed doors, rooms locked for years. Moaning. Whispering. Sometimes pleading. One guard followed what he swore was the sob of a child down a hallway he didn't recognize, only to find himself outside, without remembering how he got there. His flashlight was gone. So were 3 hours. In the surgical wing, some visitors report hearing the clink of metal tools and the low murmur of doctors consulting on a patient who isn't there. Others see shadowed figures in outdated uniforms, slipping in and out of rooms with shattered windows and rusted gurneys. One nurse claimed she saw a man in a hospital gown standing in the hallway, staring at her through the glass. When she blinked, he was on the other side of the door. No sound. No movement. Just a face, pale and bruised, pressed against the pane. But the most disturbing story is the one everyone repeats, of a room in the far west wing. The door has been chained shut for decades. No one knows why. Those who walk by say the temperature drops instantly. A few have heard a voice whispering from behind it, asking in a calm, clear tone, "Por qué me dejaron aquí? Why did you leave me here?" The halls of San Juan de Dios were once filled with the sounds of life. Now they echo with remnants of pain, loss, and things that never truly left. The hospital may have treated the sick, but not all of its patients were allowed to rest. Some are still waiting. Number 4. Panteón de Belén, Guadalajara. By day, the Panteón de Belén is a place of quiet beauty, weather-worn tombs, elaborate mausoleums, and shaded walkways winding through a piece of Guadalajara's colonial past. But when the sun dips behind the trees and shadows stretch long over the graves, something ancient and restless begins to stir. This cemetery is not merely a resting place for the dead. It is a domain of stories, of legends that refuse to be buried, and of spirits that never truly left. Built in the mid-19th century, the cemetery houses some of the city's most prominent figures. But not all who rest here went peacefully. One of the oldest and most terrifying tales centers around the so-called vampire tree. Locals say a foreigner arrived in the city in the late 1800s, pale, reclusive, and always out after dark. Soon after, children began dying, drained of blood, found with strange marks on their necks. The man was caught and killed by an angry mob. His heart was staked and buried in a deep grave. Over time, a tree sprouted from that spot, gnarled, blackened, and unlike any other in the cemetery. It still stands today. Those who've dared to touch its bark report a burning sensation in their hands. And on certain nights, when the wind moves just right, people say they hear it breathe. Some believe the vampire's spirit still lives within it, growing stronger with each passing year. They say if the tree is ever cut down, the creature beneath will rise again. But the vampire isn't the only one said to roam these grounds. Visitors often speak of a small boy who weeps beside a child-sized grave, his cries low and desperate. When approached, he vanishes, only to be seen moments later on the other side of the cemetery, repeating the same sorrowful routine. Some claim they've followed him, only to end up lost, unable to find the entrance again until dawn. There are cloaked figures too, seen slipping between graves, always just out of reach. One is said to kneel before a particular tomb every night, whispering in a language no one recognizes. The grave is unmarked. Even tour guides have their rules. Never speak the names of the dead aloud. Never stay past the final bell. And if you hear your name whispered among the trees, run. Because something in the pantheon listens. Something remembers. The cemetery no longer accepts the newly dead. But its soil is far from silent. Time does not pass the same way inside its walls. Here, the dead do not sleep. They walk. Number 5. La Casa de la Tía Tona, Chapultepec Forest, Mexico City. Deep within the tangled green heart of Chapultepec Forest lies a crumbling mansion wrapped in silence and shadow. It's not marked on most maps, but those who've grown up in Mexico City know the name well. La Casa de la Tía Tona. It's whispered in schoolyards, passed down as a dare, a legend, a warning. The kind of story that makes you glance over your shoulder as the path darkens. No one knows her real name, or even if she truly existed. They just call her Tía Tona. Some say she was a wealthy recluse who opened her doors to abandoned children. Others insist she was mentally ill, isolated, and burdened by grief. But all versions end the same way, with blood, betrayal, and madness. The story goes that she took in several street children, fed them, clothed them, gave them a place to sleep. But one night something broke. Maybe they turned on her. Maybe she snapped. But the result was a massacre. The children were found drowned in the nearby river, or worse, buried beneath the house. Tía Tona, consumed by guilt or madness, hanged herself in one of the upper rooms. Some say the rope is still there. The mansion has long since rotted, swallowed by the forest. Windows shattered, roof half collapsed, vines creeping through the brick. And yet people still go. Teenagers with flashlights and bravado. Explorers looking for proof. What they find is something else entirely. It starts with a feeling, heaviness, like the air itself resents you being there. Then the sound of leaves moving when no wind blows. Then the screaming. They say you can hear her. Not once. Not distant. But close. A scream that rises from the walls of the house and echoes through the forest, always just behind you. Some say it's not a scream of terror. It's rage. Visitors claim to see her standing at the top floor window, her figure pale and rigid, staring out as if watching for someone. Or something. Others report being lured deeper into the forest, hearing a soft voice calling them by name, only to find the house again, when they were sure they'd walked away. But the ones who run never forget the feeling that someone was right behind them, almost touching their neck. A shadow with no source. A presence that doesn't want you to leave. La Casa de la Tía Tona doesn't appear on tourist maps. No signs point to it. But it's there. Waiting behind the trees. And if you find it, if you hear her scream, don't look back. Because once you see her face in the window, she remembers yours. Number 6. Hotel Posada del Tepoztlán, Tepoztlán, Morelos. Perched on a hill overlooking the mystical town of Tepoztlán, the Hotel Posada del Tepoztlán offers luxury, panoramic views, and something far older than comfort, something ancient that stirs when the sun dips behind the cliffs. The hotel was built on sacred ground, where the ruins of Aztec temples and ceremonial structures still cling to the hillside. And though the rooms are polished and the gardens manicured, the spirits beneath the soil have never truly gone. Tepoztlán has long been considered a spiritual center, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. Locals speak of the mountain as alive, breathing with the energy of gods and warriors who once walked the land. Guests at the hotel often arrive seeking peace, but many leave with stories they never intended to collect. At night, strange things begin to happen. The staff knows it well. They speak in low voices about doors slamming without wind, about mirrors fogging up with handprints that don't belong to anyone in the room. Guests have woken up to find objects moved, sometimes placed with eerie precision, an old coin laid neatly on a pillow, or flower petals arranged in spirals on the floor. One couple found their clothes folded and stacked by the door, even though they hadn't touched them since unpacking. But it's the chants that unsettle even the most skeptical visitors. Heard usually around 3 in the morning, a deep, rhythmic humming echoes through the walls, as though a ceremony is being performed in some hidden chamber. Guests describe hearing drums, soft at first, then building, along with voices speaking in Nahuatl, the ancient language of the Aztecs. When they call the front desk to complain, the line is dead. The sound doesn't come from outside. It comes from beneath. Then there are the figures. Tall, silent, and dressed in what appears to be ceremonial garb, bare feet, feathered headdresses, obsidian blades. One woman reported seeing a warrior standing at the edge of the garden just before dawn, unmoving, his eyes locked on hers. When she blinked, he was gone. But the grass where he stood was flattened, as if someone had been standing there for hours. One night, a guest awoke to find a shadow standing at the foot of the bed. Not a thief. Not a hallucination. He described the figure as wearing golden armor, his face partially hidden behind an animal mask. The air was thick with the scent of copal, the sacred incense used in Aztec rituals. When he finally dared to move, the figure vanished, but the smell lingered for hours. The Hotel Posada del Tepoztlán may offer comfort, but it was built on ancient echoes. And at night those echoes rise. They chant. They move. They remember. Number 7. Chichen Itzá, Yucatan. By daylight, Chichen Itzá is a wonder, stone pyramids rising from the jungle, carved serpent heads guarding stairways, and tourists marveling at the scale of the ancient city. But when the sun disappears and the crowds thin, something ancient begins to stir. The ruins may be silent, but they are not empty. Chichen Itzá is still alive, just not in the way people expect. For centuries, it was the beating heart of the Mayan civilization. Ceremonies were held under the stars, blood spilled in sacred rites to honor the gods and ensure balance. And though the people are long gone, the rituals echo still. Locals tell of shadows moving through the temple of Kukulkan after dusk, long-robed figures with hollow eyes ascending and descending its steps as if the ceremonies never ended. It's the cenotes that carry the heaviest weight. Natural sinkholes believed to be portals to the underworld. Hundreds of offerings were thrown into them, precious stones, gold, and, often, people. The sacred cenote was where victims were bound and dropped into the depths as sacrifices. On certain nights, when the air is still and the jungle holds its breath, people have heard the splash, followed by screams. Not of fear, but of something else. Something being taken. One guide, who swore never to walk the site alone again, claimed he heard chanting rising from the ball court as he locked up for the night. Low and rhythmic, like voices from beneath the earth. He followed the sound to the edge of the court, and there, through the mist, he saw them, figures in full ceremonial dress, their faces painted, holding blades of obsidian. He said they didn't speak. They only watched him. When he turned to run, He felt a sharp sting on his back, like a cut. The mark faded after a few days, but the dreams never stopped. Tourists have taken photos of the ruins at night, only to find robed figures standing atop the pyramids in the images, figures that weren't there when the shutter clicked. Others have described feeling pulled toward the cenotes, a pressure in their chests like a hand guiding them forward. One woman collapsed while walking near the Temple of the Warriors. When she woke up, she was repeating a phrase in Yucatec Maya, a language she didn't speak. No one could explain how. The spirits at Chichen Itzá are not malicious. But they are present. Bound to duty, to tradition, to blood spilled long ago in the name of the gods. And when the jungle is quiet and the stars watch from above, the priests return. They chant. They sacrifice. And they remember every soul ever offered. Number 8. The Palace of the Inquisition, Mexico City. In the heart of Mexico City's historic center, just steps from the cathedral and bustling plazas, stands a building with walls soaked in blood and secrets. Its elegant facade masks what lies within, corridors where pain was once routine, and mercy was a forgotten word. This is the Palace of the Inquisition, where justice was twisted, confessions were forced, and the screams of the damned still claw through the silence. Built in the 18th century, it served as the headquarters of the Holy Office, the institution responsible for enforcing religious purity. Heresy was punished without hesitation. Below the building, in a network of cold, damp chambers, countless men and women were tortured into admitting sins they may never have committed. Iron restraints, racks, and choking masks were common tools. Most never saw daylight again. Today, the palace operates as a museum. Tour guides speak softly about the past, leading visitors through the hallways where judges once passed sentence in the name of salvation. But not all who enter feel alone. Shadowy figures are often seen lingering near the staircase, appearing in mirrors only to vanish when looked at directly. Some visitors report an oppressive weight pressing on their chest as they descend into the basement, the former torture chambers, sealed for decades, but still very much awake. Security guards tell stories they're not supposed to share. One refused to return after hearing the sound of chains dragging across stone floors, even though he was the only one in the building. Another described hearing soft, frantic whispers coming from the old cells, prayers muttered in Spanish, Latin, and even Nahuatl. Sometimes, they say, the air shifts suddenly, carrying the scent of burned hair and blood. One exhibit holds the original instruments of torture. Visitors often leave that room with headaches, nausea, or a burning sensation in their hands. Cameras fail to capture images. Recorders fill with static. A group of schoolchildren once went silent while passing through, then all began crying at once. When asked why, one child simply said, "They didn't want us here." The most chilling legend speaks of a man known only as El Arrepentido, the Repentant One. His ghost is seen kneeling in a corner cell, head bowed, hands bound in rusted chains. Those who've seen him say he doesn't move. He only waits. Some believe he was a priest-turned-prisoner, tortured for showing mercy to a heretic. Others say he was a false confessor, punished for lying to escape the rack. Either way, he's still there, whispering his final prayers into stone that will never answer back. In the Palace of the Inquisition, the echoes never stop. They bleed through the walls, carried by guilt, pain, and the cries of souls who were silenced, but not forgotten. Number 9. Hacienda del Muerto, Mina, Nuevo Leon. In the arid desert outside Mina, where the wind howls through dry brush and silence stretches for miles, there stands a crumbling estate with a name that leaves little to the imagination: Hacienda del Muerto. The Hacienda of the Dead. Sun-bleached walls and collapsed roofs are all that remain, but those ruins hold echoes of a violent past, one soaked in blood, betrayal, and lingering unrest. Once a thriving ranching estate in the 19th century, the hacienda's fate was sealed during the Mexican Revolution. It became a strategic stronghold, traded back and forth between rebel and federal forces. Battles erupted on its grounds, gunfire shattering the air, bodies buried in shallow graves behind the chapel. Locals say that one night, in the heat of conflict, the hacienda was surrounded and burned. Those who didn't flee were executed. Their screams mingled with the crackle of flames, and never truly stopped. Now the land is still, but far from empty. Visitors brave enough to approach speak of ghostly riders seen in the distance. Not shadows. Not tricks of light. Real figures, mounted, armed, riding in formation across the desert. They vanish before they reach the ruins, swallowed by dust and time. Some hear horses snorting just beyond the tree-line, or the metallic clink of spurs against stone. Others report war cries echoing across the plains at night, followed by sudden, unnatural silence. The hacienda itself is worse. Doors creak open on their own. Footsteps echo down broken hallways. Flickering lights appear in the windows, long after sunset, when no one should be there. Campers nearby have reported waking to the smell of smoke, only to find the ruins cold and untouched. One man claimed he saw figures standing along the second-floor balcony, rifles in hand, watching him without eyes. Inside what's left of the chapel, the air shifts strangely. It grows heavy, thick, as if the room is still filled with bodies unseen. People describe hearing whispered arguments, voices frantic with fear or rage. A few have collapsed suddenly inside, later claiming they felt a cold hand press against their chest, forcing them to the ground. There's a grave near the main entrance, its marker long worn away. Locals won't go near it. Legend says it belongs to a revolutionary commander who betrayed his men to the enemy in exchange for his life. The soldiers were slaughtered. He was executed anyway, shot by both sides. Now, his spirit roams the property, searching for forgiveness that will never come. The desert is quiet, but it remembers. And at Hacienda del Muerto, the war never truly ended. The riders return. The dead still march. And the land, once soaked in blood, calls out for those who will listen, or follow. Number 10. Casa de los Tubos, Monterrey, Nuevo León. On the outskirts of Monterrey, tucked into a hill and surrounded by thick brush, stands a structure that doesn't quite belong. From a distance, it looks like something unfinished, strange and hollow, concrete tubes stacked like a child's forgotten toy. Up close, it's worse. The silence is deeper. The air colder. Locals call it the Casa de los Tubos, the House of Pipes, and few dare to step inside. The house was designed in the 1970s, its cylindrical shape intended to accommodate a young girl with a disability. The curved ramps and round architecture were meant to make movement easier, to create a home unlike any other. But before the house could be finished, tragedy struck. The girl, exploring one of the upper levels, slipped and fell to her death. Some say the fall was an accident. Others believe she was pushed. The workers stopped showing up after that. Construction halted. The house was never completed. And yet, it never emptied either. The property quickly gained a reputation. People who visited reported strange sensations, dizziness, confusion, the overwhelming urge to leave. Those who stayed too long heard things, soft weeping from the upper chambers, footsteps pacing in the curved halls, even laughter that didn't sound quite human. The kind that starts as a giggle and ends as a scream. Ghost hunters have entered with equipment, hoping for something to validate the whispers. They almost always find more than they bargained for. One group recorded the cry of a child echoing through the tubes, followed by a whisper that said, "Vite, go away." Another caught an EVP of what sounded like a girl humming a nursery rhyme. The problem was, no one else in the group recognized the song. And none of them remembered hearing it in real time. A few have seen her, the girl. Pale, silent, standing just out of reach, her face blank but her eyes pleading. She appears mostly near the spiral ramp where she supposedly fell, as if trapped in the moment of her death. People say she watches you with a look not of anger, but of sorrow, until you blink. Then she's gone. The interior walls are covered in graffiti now. Names, symbols, warnings. One message, repeated in multiple places, reads simply, "Ella no está sola." She is not alone. Some believe more than one spirit inhabits the Casa de los Tubos. That something else took residence after the girl died. Something darker. Construction workers once spoke of tools being thrown across the site. One even claimed to be shoved so hard he broke 2 ribs. Whatever lives inside those concrete walls, it doesn't like being disturbed. The Casa de los Tubos never became a home. But it remains, unfinished, echoing, and alive with voices that should have faded long ago. Inside its looping halls, time bends, laughter lingers, and death never left. Number 11. Museo de Cera, Wax Museum, Mexico City. In the heart of Mexico City's bustling Zona Rosa stands the Museo de Cera, a wax museum known for its detailed replicas of celebrities, politicians, and historical figures. By day, it's a place of fascination, drawing crowds with lifelike statues and elaborate scenes. But by night, when the lights dim and the halls empty out, the museum becomes something else entirely. Something colder. Something alive. It starts with the eyes. Visitors have whispered that some statues seem to follow them, their gaze shifting ever so slightly when no one's looking. A crooked smile where none was before. A hand raised an inch higher than it had been moments ago. Most chalk it up to imagination, until the footage tells another story. Several night vision security cameras were installed after multiple reports of disturbances. What they captured made even the most skeptical guards quit without notice. In one clip, a wax figure of a 19th century soldier appears to tilt his head slowly to the side, his mouth twitching into a grin. In another, a female figure is seen stepping off her pedestal, taking 2 careful steps forward before freezing again, just out of frame. The museum denies the footage publicly. Privately, staff refuse to talk about what they've seen. One janitor claimed he heard faint breathing behind him while mopping near the horror exhibit. When he turned around, the wax figure of a cloaked man had moved closer. He quit that night. Another worker locked up the building and saw, through the glass, one of the statues pressing its face against the door, something it couldn't physically do without shattering the glass. The imprint stayed for days. The most disturbing room is the Hall of Legends, a narrow corridor lined with famous and infamous figures from Mexican history. Multiple employees have reported hearing whispers in that space, low and urgent, though the room is sealed off after hours. One described hearing his own name spoken in a voice that sounded both childlike and ancient. When he turned, every statue seemed just slightly misaligned, as if they'd been moving while his back was turned. Some say the museum is cursed, not by a single spirit, but by the energy of obsession. The need to recreate life so perfectly that the line between real and replica began to blur. Others believe something darker was drawn in over time, feeding off the endless rows of silent faces. Trapped, perhaps, in the wax itself. The Museo de Cera may welcome thousands of visitors during the day. But at night, it belongs to something else. And as the last lights go out and the halls fall quiet, the statues do not rest. They wait. They watch. And sometimes they move. Number 12. Guanajuato Mummy Museum, Guanajuato. Beneath the cobbled streets of Guanajuato, down a cool corridor that smells of stone and time, is a place unlike any other. The Museo de las Momias houses row upon row of bodies, real ones, pulled from the earth not by intent, but by accident. When the local cemetery ran out of space in the 19th century, unpaid graves were exhumed. What emerged was unexpected: corpses preserved by the dry, mineral-rich soil. Their flesh shriveled, their mouths agape in eternal silence. Or maybe, not so silent. Visitors walk the narrow aisles between glass cases, face to face with death. Some mummies appear to scream, their jaws frozen mid-howl. Others clutch at invisible wounds, or stare with hollow sockets that seem to follow. The unnatural preservation gives them the appearance of protest, bodies that didn't want to be unearthed, displayed, stared at. But it's what happens when the crowds leave that makes the museum infamous. Night security is a rotating role. No one lasts long. Guards report hearing soft footsteps when no one is there, or the creak of glass shifting behind them. Some have sworn that mummies appear to move slightly overnight, an arm raised, a mouth wider, a body tilted just a bit more than before. Cameras have captured strange flickers, blurs where there should be stillness. The most disturbing presence, though, comes from a child. A small mummy, no more than 5 years old, lies in her glass coffin in one of the quieter rooms. Her hands are folded delicately, her mouth closed unlike most of the others. She has no name, but the staff call her La Nina. Visitors leave toys for her. Candies. Notes. Not out of sentimentality, but fear. Several janitors have refused to clean her room after dark. They say she cries. Not loudly, just a soft, muffled sobbing that seems to rise from the floor itself. One man described hearing it as he swept near her display. When he looked up, her eyes seemed darker than before. Wet. He quit the next day. There are reports of children crying uncontrollably in her room, clutching their parents and pointing to the glass, saying she's asking them to play. Some parents laugh it off. Others carry their kids out trembling, unable to explain why the air felt so cold, or why the lights flickered just as they turned their backs. The museum says nothing, of course. To them, it's history. Culture. But those who've spent time inside know better. These aren't just mummies. They're remnants of souls that may not have been ready to leave. And every glass case, every silent scream, is a reminder. Some things pulled from the ground should have stayed buried. Especially the ones that still weep. Number 13. Ex Convento del Desierto de los Leones, Mexico City. Hidden in the misty woods of the Sierra de las Cruces, the Ex Convento del Desierto de los Leones sits in stillness, surrounded by pines and silence. Built in the early 1600s, it was a place of solitude and sacrifice, a monastery where cloistered monks lived in near-complete isolation, devoting themselves to prayer, discipline, and denial. The kind of place where time forgets to move forward, and where the dead don't know they've passed. Today, the monastery is open to visitors, its stone walls and courtyards frozen in another century. But even under the midday sun, something about it feels wrong. The shadows are too long. The rooms too quiet. And those who wander off the marked paths find more than just empty cells. There are stories of monks still walking the corridors, silent, hooded, never looking up. They vanish the moment they're approached, their sandals leaving no imprint on the dust-covered floors. Some say they appear mostly at dusk, emerging from corners with no light, moving through the fog like memories that refuse to fade. But the worst of it is below. Beneath the convent lies a network of tunnels and chambers. Cold, damp, and winding. They were once used for penance, spaces where monks would kneel in the dark, isolated for days or weeks, their only company the echo of their own prayers. Now, those same tunnels echo with something else. Visitors report hearing chanting deep underground. Gregorian-style hymns, carried through the stone, rising and falling in patterns no one alive understands. Sometimes the voices sound close, as if just around the next bend. Other times, they're distant, like a choir buried far beneath your feet. People who venture too far inside often return pale and trembling, unable to say exactly what happened. One woman collapsed near the old confession room, repeating the same Latin phrase over and over, though she never studied the language. There are lights too. Flickering orbs that float just out of reach in the underground halls, weaving through the tunnels like will-o'-the-wisps. One man followed them, thinking they were part of a guided tour, until he found himself alone in a bricked-up passage with no memory of how he got there. And then there are the knocks. Always in threes. Soft. Rhythmic. Coming from behind locked doors. Some believe the spirits that linger here are not angry, but bound, monks who took vows of silence and seclusion so seriously that even death hasn't freed them. Others say the convent absorbed the pain and sacrifice of centuries, and now replays it like a loop. A haunting. A penance. The Desierto de los Leones is beautiful, serene, and sacred. But once you've stood in the dark of its stone heart, and heard the chanting rise, you understand, solitude can become something else entirely. Something that waits. Something that watches. Something that prays back. Number 14. Rio de Catorce, San Luis Potosí. High in the mountains of San Luis Potosí, hidden behind a long, winding tunnel carved through rock, lies Real de Catorce, a town that time abandoned and something older reclaimed. Once a booming silver mining settlement in the 18th century, it is now part ghost town, part pilgrimage site. The streets, though repopulated by shops and seekers, still feel hollow, like they're waiting for someone who never returned. Locals speak of a strange energy clinging to the town. It hangs in the thin mountain air and settles in the bones of the cobblestone paths. Walk those streets at dusk, and you may feel it, a breath on the back of your neck, a whisper that doesn't quite reach your ears. Something watching. Something waiting. The mines themselves are sealed, but people still report the sound of picks and shovels ringing from deep underground. Others have seen silhouettes, figures of miners, caked in dirt and ash, stumbling through alleys before vanishing into walls. Horses too. Not live ones. Spectral shapes galloping through the night, hoofs striking stone but leaving no echo, no trace. One traveler claimed he saw a riderless horse trotting along the ridge at twilight, its eyes glowing faintly, its saddle empty but swaying, as if it was searching for its lost rider. But it's outside the town, in the surrounding desert, where the stories turn darker. Every year, thousands of Huacal pilgrims make the journey through the desert to offer prayers to their sacred mountain, Wirikuta. They speak of guardians, spirits that test travelers, appearing as strangers, animals, or sudden storms. Not all pilgrims make it. A few have vanished entirely. Others return changed, claiming to have encountered beings made of light and shadow who ask them questions they couldn't understand. Some never speak of what happened at all. One man, a skeptic, set off into the desert alone with a camera and a journal. He was found 2 days later barefoot, eyes sunburned, whispering the same phrase. No están muertos. They are not dead. He never explained who they were. Real de Catorce exists in a strange limbo, half alive, half memory. The church bells still ring. Candles still flicker in old windows. But the veil is thinner here. Time folds. Spirits walk freely. The town feels less like a place and more like a threshold, where the living brush shoulders with whatever lingers in the spaces between. And if you stay too long, past nightfall, past reason, you might start to forget which side of the veil you came from. Number 15. El Callejón del Beso, Guanajuato. In the tangled heart of Guanajuato, where alleys wind like whispered secrets between pastel-painted houses, there is one passage that draws lovers and ghosts alike, El Callejón del Beso, the Alley of the Kiss. Just 68 centimeters wide, it's barely enough space for the balconies of 2 opposing homes to touch. And that's where the legend begins, with a love so close, yet never far from tragedy. Long ago, a young woman named Carmen lived under the strict gaze of her wealthy, iron-fisted father. Her window faced another across the narrow alley, where a poor miner named Luis rented a small room. They fell in love through stolen glances, whispered words, and hands reaching across the void. Each night they'd lean from their balconies, fingertips brushing, lips meeting in secret kisses just inches from discovery. But love that burns too bright often draws the dark. Carmen's father found out. Furious, he locked her away and swore that if she saw Luis again, there would be blood. Still, the lovers defied him. One last kiss. One last night. That's all they asked? But as their lips met across the stone chasm, the door behind Carmen flew open, and her father, in a fit of rage, drove a dagger through her back. Luis held her hand as she died, her blood dripping onto the 3rd step below. The next morning, he threw himself from his balcony to the stone below, unable to live in a world without her. Now, they say, the alley never forgot. Tourists flock to El Callejón del Beso, believing that a kiss on the 3rd step will bless their love with eternal luck. But those who ignore the tradition, or mock it, sometimes leave with more than they bargained for. Couples have reported icy fingers brushing their skin, the sudden feeling of being pulled apart. A coldness between them that lingers for days. Others claim to hear quiet sobbing echoing through the alley, especially at dusk when the light turns the stones crimson. Some have taken photos only to find pale figures hovering in the background, Luis and Carmen, forever reaching for each other, forever inches apart. One local vendor swears he saw a couple frozen in place for minutes, their lips just about to meet, eyes wide with fear, as if something unseen held them there. When they finally kissed, the air around them snapped back to normal. They left without a word. El Callejón del Beso is beautiful, romantic. But it's also cursed by longing and unfinished endings. It is a place where love once bloomed and bled, where stone remembers the heat of stolen touch, and the chill of steel. And so, when you visit, kiss your beloved on the third step. Not just for luck, but to honor the lovers who still wait in the dark, dreaming of one more kiss that death never let them finish.